everybody, hope you're all doing well. Apologies if my voice is a bit hoarse today, but I've been a bit busy. But as you probably know, today is the day where I talk about my experience at the newest Prodigy gig, the Heavyweight Champions Tour with Carl Cox. I went to the date in Leeds, First Direct Arena, on Wednesday, the 22nd of April, and it was a really fucking good night. So I want to talk about it a bit. So, I mean, first of all, Carl Cox as opener, fucking brilliant. Like, you know, I'll be honest, I did feel a little bit kind of, you know, out-rave-headed, given that of the, like, 30, 40 tracks that he played over the 2 hours that he was on, I knew 2 of them, which was kind of an embarrassment. And one of them was a Prodigy tune, because he played Wind It Up Rewound, which isn't even on streaming anymore, so that was a real highlight, and that got a big reaction from the crowd. The other one was SL2's Way in My Brain, which is just a banger all day long. But like there wasn't a dull track in the list that he played. There wasn't one where he was playing, I'm like, oh god, can't wait for this to be over. He is just like a master DJ, really. I mean, I think I've said before on this channel, I'm not big on just DJs who play other people's stuff. Like, you know, if somebody asked me to go and see Fatboy Slim, I wouldn't be that bothered, because he either plays just other people's tunes, or when he does play his own tunes, it's like remixed versions and stuff. So, you know, normally with stuff like that, I'm not really into it, but Carl Cox is just a master. You know, he must have the record collection of like I don't even know what the comparison would be, but, you know, the skill he has to do it all on vinyl, 3 decks, and do it completely by hand for 2 hours without missing a beat is really admirable. Not to mention, he played some absolute bangers, so that was, you know, that's all that really needs to be said there. Carl Cox was fucking brilliant. Getting onto the Prodigy set, though, I think to give this bit a bit of structure, I'll kind of go song by song, and I will play some clips of the gig interspersed throughout this video, but I'll try to keep it mostly to stuff that me and my dad filmed on the night. If I have to use something from somewhere else, I will say where I got it from. So just to say about the intro, like I'm always like interested about how the Prodigy's intros work, because, you know, they have this way to, again, it's like Liam said before, the Prodigy, an aspect of the Prodigy that people might not be as, like, you know, might not be as obvious, is the sort of cinematic flair that they have. I mean, obviously there's tracks like you know, Weather Experience and Claustrophobic Sting and Beyond the Death Ray that have that kind of filmic air to them. But I think their intros are really a good way to get an idea for how seriously they take that, because this one is insane. It's been nicknamed Army March 2026, and it uses a sample from, I believe, some kind of old army film. I'm not quite sure which one it is. I'll put a screenshot up here somewhere when I find the answer to it. But it just is incredible. You know, the way those like big horn shots come in, and then the marching drums, but then all the air raid sirens and shit. And then that moment when they came on stage, Jesus Christ, there was nothing else like it. Like, you know, I was going insane. You can probably hear my voice screaming like a girl at the back of this video. But then, you know, when Maxim came on and it properly kicked in, I like, you know, that was it always is like a genuinely really transcendent moment in the gig. Like, you know, they're coming on, let's do this, I'm ready, I'm so ready. I was like, yeah, the hype levels for me were through the roof. And then when Omen kicked in, again, just fucking insane. Oh, I do say I really do like what they've done with Omen in the last couple of years, where they've put the Peng Shui remix, the kind of like half-time metalcore breakdown at the end of it. Fucking insane. It's absolutely brilliant. Although there are a couple of tracks, and I think Omen is one of them, where it doesn't need a great deal of live retooling to like hit as hard as a bus. But I think that little change makes all the difference, because it's incredible. Then Voodoo People, again, I think the way they've done that is really, really cool. You know, the way they start with a kind of modified version of the '05 remix, then kind of transition really, really nicely into the Pendulum remix, goes absolutely insane every time. Like, not the original is obviously fantastic, and that had everyone jumping out of their seats. But then, you know, when that Pendulum remix kicks in, and those drum and bass drums come in, and it just like absolutely pummels everyone in the stadium, and that's like 13,000 people going bananas, man. It was great. And then, you know, Maxim's obviously on top form, MCing and all that sort of thing. Like, you know, I think I've heard people say that, like, it felt like he was absent during some of the more recent gigs because of how the set list is laid out, and I'll get onto that in a minute. But like, the guy's skill for just like whipping up a crowd is absolutely incredible. Like, it might not be the most talented rapper or beatboxer on the planet or whatever, but his just sheer ability to just like take a room full of 13,000 people and just make the energy levels go through the roof, you know, just with like a couple of words through a microphone, it's unlike anything else I've ever seen. And, you know, I also think that the kind of slow hip-hop outro that they've put onto it works really well as well. So, yeah, just a really well-rounded bit. I mean, they haven't had to fool around with that too much since, I think, 2015. I think that's when they started doing all the Pendulum mix stuff anyway, originally. But, yeah, it works fucking great. And then Poison kind of got a bit of a retool as well. I mean, not a massive one, but certainly one that helps. So you've got the first bit, which is kind of, you know, the classic School Snaps beat kind of Poison set, like part one, I guess, of the original track, which always is one of my favourites, because Poison, as soon as I got into the Prodigy, was one of my favourite tracks from them. And so hearing it live in any instance at any time will always kind of, you know, get me bouncing my head and, you know, fucking rolling around in my seat and stuff. So that's always cool. And then the part two that they've been doing since about 2010 with the kind of System of a Down riff interpolation and the breakdown, it's just absolutely brutal. And those screamed vocals that get in the background, those kind of shouted kind of ad-lib things, add so much energy. That is like always one of the most insane moments of a Prodigy show for me. But then what I thought was a really nice touch is on the last couple of gigs of this tour, they've almost added a part three with the beats from the Method Man Release Your Delph remix that they used to have as kind of a part three of Poison all the way back in 2005. To see that be brought back in kind of somewhat of a way here, you know, it's a bit of a nice, you know, cool nod to the old school fans, but also just sounds really great as well. Like, it keeps in with the hip hop tempo, but also gives kind of more of a swagger vibe to it, which is really fucking cool. So I enjoyed that a lot. A lot of people were really weirded out as to why Everybody in the Place came back. I think because, you know, on the Disruptor tour, they used Warriors Dance, I think, which is a fucking fantastic choice, by the way. If you wanted to have a break with like a Liam-only track, Warriors Dance is a great way. But also, I think just Everyone in the Place is just a fantastic track. Everybody in the Place, sorry, is just a fantastic track, and it wouldn't, you know, they could play that a million times and I'd never get bored of it. I think that it's just, and I think what helps is that Climatize works so well as a link into it. You know, it's kind of that dramatic breather before the chaos begins. And I just think, you know, that riff in Everybody in the Place and the way that they've like updated the beats is just fucking undeniable. It's like classic rave spirit kind of brought into the modern day, and like hits so hard, and it was fucking great. Like, again, would I maybe like a more up-to-date choice in, like, you know, future kind of gigs? Sure, Warriors Dance would be cool. You know, Need Someone, even, I'd take that one. I quite like Need Someone. I like Need Someone a fair bit, actually. Destroy, even, if you wanted to go down that route, you wanted to go fucking proper obscure, you could go like fucking Speedway, even. Like, you know, there are plenty of choices to go at, and, you know, as much as I believe that, you know, I agree that Everybody in the Place has been played a lot, I do think, you know, you're hard pressed to find a much better choice than that. And also, you know, it's one of my friends who couldn't unfortunately get to the gig. It's one of her favourite Prodigy tracks, so I was kind of glad that they played it, like, you know, keeping her in mind in a way. So shout out Katja, she knows who she is. and then light up the sky again. It's like with Omen when I said earlier, where a track does not need a lot of retooling to work in a live setting. Like, you know, there's a few like glitch edits or extra ad-libs that they put into it, and I actually think, no, actually I disagree. I think that the way that they kind of shorten it to make the kind of galloping beat at the end kind of hit a little harder, I do think that is a very, very worthwhile edit made to the live version. But again, it's not masses and masses different from the studio version, but I don't think it needs it, because it's one of my favourite tracks from No Tourists, one of my favourite tracks in the kind of, you know, post-Aono era. So I, you know, absolutely, you know, don't, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, you know. But I think, you know, if they wanted to do some like proper mangled like dubstep acid remix of it, that would be cool. But again, it's one of them things, you don't need to do a lot with it. It's kind of, you know, perfect as is in a way. And then the way that they retooled Firestarter on this tour was so fucking cool. Like, I mean, it will give me a bit of chance to talk about the stage setup as well. But Claustrophobic Sting as a link going into Firestarter is absolutely genius. Like, they already had Claustrophobic Sting as a kind of half link that used to go into Day Is My Enemy, but like the way that they use the acid lines on top of it and those really dramatic drum hits, it's fucking great. And the way that they use that to like kind of, you know, signal the lasers, like the Keith lasers, is fucking great. And speaking of the stage setup, I heard some people talking about like, oh, they have like the laser ray guns or like the light ray guns or whatever, and I thought they were just misspeaking, because in footage I'd seen of the gigs, I couldn't see them. I mean, granted, they were like balcony view and not very zoomed in, but I was like, what are they talking about? And then I went to the gig and I was like, holy fuck, they actually have fucking ray gun, Men in Black fucking space guns shooting lasers from the back of the stage. It was fucking amazing. Like, the video screens are already great, and I think the flags and stuff that they had put up looked really fucking cool, but fucking laser space machine guns shooting fucking rave lasers out is an idea that only the Prodigy would ever have, and it is one of the most fucking awesome things I've ever seen. And of course, Firestarter, always a fucking fantastic moment in the set. You know, the live instrumental kind of 06/original retooling is great, and then the way it transitions into a kind of edit of the Andy C mix, fucking incredible. It's like, I know I'm swearing a lot on using this, I'm sorry, but like, it's, you know, it's one of them things. Like, Firestarter is, you know, my favourite song of all time, and so, you know, I could hear that again 1,000 million billion times and never get tired of it. But I think, again, the way that they've retooled it in the last couple of years has made it not only just hit like a fucking ton of bricks, but also act as a very touching tribute to Keith, in that, you know, it's not kind of, you know, maudlin or kind of like sappy or soppy or anything. It's just like as full force and in your face as it could possibly be, which, you know, the perfect representation of somebody like him. So you couldn't find a more fitting tribute in my mind. And then we got Thunder, which actually only got introduced from the second date of the tour, and my god am I glad it did, because this thing is like, I know that some people on the Brainkiller forum are fans of the original album mix, and the original album mix is pretty cool, I do have to say, but I enjoy this. I enjoy that and the Thunder dubstep live version for very, very different reasons. And the main reason that I enjoy Thunder dub so much in a live setting is just because it is one of those absolute like face scrunching riffs. Like when that bass line comes in and those drums that just like absolutely smack you dead in the chest. It is like one of those things where you just can't help but sit there and be like, whoa, let's fucking have it, you know, kind of, you know, one of them, you know, it drives me insane every time I hear it. I think that the original one on the album is kind of more of a, it's almost kind of like a sinister but still kind of jump up rave vibe, whereas this is just like straight up evil fucking punch to the face kind of vibe, which I think works a lot better in a live setting. And I also think that the kind of interstitial kind of more kind of twangy beat moments are also really cool. I mean, it's like I say, again, it's a very, very minor retooling of something that they've been doing for a while, but they haven't actually played Thunderdub live since before the Notorious tour, so to see it come back here, even in a slightly retooled way that it is, I think is really fucking cool. And then we get to kind of a double dose of Liam tracks with No Good and The Day Is My Enemy, which I can kind of get, given how the set was kind of laid out, that people think Maxim seemed more absent on this gig, because Climatising Everybody in the Place, that's just Liam on his own. Light Up the Sky, you've got Maxim, but then Claustrophobic Singing to Firestarter, Maxim doesn't say anything. Then you've got one Maxim track with Thunder, and then two Liam only tracks, so it does feel a bit weirdly staggered in terms of setup and layout. But moving on to the tracks themselves, I mean, No Good has had a really cool retooling in the last couple of years, so like it starts off obviously just kind of in more of the drop part of the original track, which I think, but then they kind of rearranged it so like it's got these extra fills and beats going on top of it, which is really, really great. And then the vocal part obviously just slams as hard as it ever did. So you've kind of got the more kind of truncated edit album version in the first half, but then you've got that kind of hip-hop breakdown into the kind of crowd call and response part that always goes down really, really well. And I think that the way that Liam's kind of retooled that in order to just kind of maximize crowd interaction, but also kind of hype, I guess, through that is, I think is a really, really cool choice. But then also how they have in more recent gigs kind of switched out the second call and response part for a fucking break and enter kind of 40 seconds of the breakdown is so cool. Because, I mean, the original version, or like the live version of No Good is fantastic, but then the way that it fades out and like the glass breaks and the whoops from break and enter coming and those drums just like fucking racketing along at like 1,000,000,000 miles an hour, it's a brilliant moment in the set. I mean, I think they started it in the 2025 European festival shows, I want to say, something like that, and I'll be honest, I was really, really jealous when I saw people post videos of it, so getting to experience that like in the flesh, in person, was such a cool moment in the set. And I think although it lasted like 30 seconds, I think, if you asked a hardcore Prodigy fan, they would turn around and go, that was fucking cool. And then Day Is My Enemy was just absolutely insane, because they actually got live military drummers to do the fucking thing. It's great. They come out in all this like, it's kind of like military gear crossed with like scuba gear, and they've got these like, kind of it's almost a sort of like marching snares that Slipknot use when they play certain tracks live. And like, even though it's only like a very, very subtle kind of addition, it makes all the difference, not only to the stage setup, because it looks absolutely incredible, but also you can hear those extra kind of snappy snare hits coming on top of it. And I think Day Is My Enemy is actually a great choice for an instrumental only track, particularly with the way that they have that extra kind of bleepy riff from the hip hop remix on top of the drop. Now it works so well. And I also think that the kind of post track kind of interstitial thing that they've been playing live for the last like couple of years, I also think is fantastic. I mean, I don't think it will be a full track, but I think that it is kind of a really cool atmospheric, again, another one of those kind of cinematic moments that work really, really well in the set as well. And then we have Invaders Must Die, which, I'll be honest, of all the ones in the set, is probably like in terms of like the necessity in the set, is probably like kind of a bit further down on my rankings. But that's not to say it doesn't hit hard every time, because I feel like, kind of ousting the kind of album version beats in place of the reamped version, the kind of break beats underneath that one, I do think makes it work a lot better. And I also think that having that kind of crowd interaction at the slowed down part also works really well. I just think that in terms of like tracks in the live set, like, it is a great song. I just think that I've become kind of fatigue to it over time. I don't quite know why that one and not any of the other ones in the set, because there are definitely songs that kind of Prodigy fans have become more weary of over time than that one. So I don't know why it's that one particularly for me, but absolutely, I'm not saying it's a bad moment at all, because it always goes fucking hard. It's just like, if I had to rank all of the songs in the set in terms of like essentiality, that'd probably be like, near the bottom of the pile. But obviously, I was still moshing my fucking head off. And then Roadblocks, which is one of those that people have said that they need to remove from the set because they think it's getting old. I disagree, actually, because, I mean, clearly it's one of Maxim's favourite ones to perform live. Like, that's his, like, signature song now. Like, if Poison was his signature song before, while Keith was with them, now that Keith isn't, it's almost like Roadblocks has taken on the mantle as, like, Maxim's signature song, and he seems to always really enjoy playing it. And I always think it just goes really hard. Like, those drum and bass beats are incredible. The kind of industrial whirring synths that go on top of it, but then also the, like, really kind of ethereal and kind of cinematic string sections that go throughout the track, or like this kind of synth strings, I guess. Brilliant. I always think that it's one of the most hardest hitting moments in a Prodigy set, and so I really at this point couldn't imagine a Prodigy set without it. Like, it would feel weird without it, I think, because of, again, how much of integral it is to Maxim nowadays, it seems, but also just how fucking brilliant it is. Like, even going back to when it was Spitfast, before it had fully evolved, that just was insane, and it always continues to be insane, even up until now, in my opinion. So there you are. And then we have one of the most out of nowhere pulls of the entire tour, which was Weather Experience, which is, again, another one of those kind of cinematic cool down moments, but that is absolutely Liam's time to shine, because I don't know, I mean, again, the difference between that and the album version isn't huge, but the way that those synth strings sound in a live setting is absolutely unbelievable. Like, it's another one of those, like, transcendent moments, like I said earlier, where just as soon as those strings kick in and all those lasers kind of blasting over the crowd, it is a euphoric moment. It really, really is. And I also think that the kind of very, very sparse, kind of hard-hitting drums do definitely make a difference. And I think Leo and Rob, I should mention at this point, are also really great in terms of just adding that extra little flourish to certain tracks. So Leo with the odd, like, ride cymbal kind of little embellishment on this track particularly, or Rob on Roadblocks with kind of those extra bits of guitar riffs and stuff. There are loads of different tracks that I could pick out where Rob and Leo definitely make a palpable difference in the live setting, but Weather Experience is definitely one where I think the extra drums from Leo help. And I would also like to say, there was this fill after Weather Experience that was fucking evil. There is no other word I can use to describe it. I couldn't remember hearing it, and I hadn't obviously seen it in footage that I'd seen of the tour thus far. So when it kicked in, for a second I genuinely thought they were going to start playing a new track, because I didn't recognise it, and I thought it sounded fucking incredible. Apparently, they played it in the winter leg of the Army of the Ants tour, so the European dates. I think it was in Stuttgart and Paris they played it in, which obviously I wouldn't have seen, or if I did see them, I maybe wouldn't have remembered. I honestly wouldn't mind if they made that a full track. Like, they've got Hit the Switch already as a kind of cinematic angle, but what's wrong with having two of those on an album, I mean, on Music for the Jilted Generation, you had, 3 Kilos and kind of the heat, the energy and stuff like that. Like, they were both more kind of, cinematic tracks, so why not have two this time? I'd certainly be down for it, given how fucking epic it sounded, so yeah, why not? And then we're kind of getting into the big boys of the set. So Their Law, again, another one that doesn't need a lot of retooling, but always hits like an absolute, a freight train. It is incredible. The way they just melded metal and punk riffs with those, super, slamming. I think it's Schooly D where the drums originally come from, but oh my god, like even just adding the kind of dance hall sound effects, so like, you know, the lasers and the air horns and stuff, it just helps create this air of chaos that once those drums and those guitars hit, absolutely the chaos levels are just amped up to 1,000,000. And I also think that Liam kind of playing the little Release Your Delph synth link over the breakdown actually works really, really well to kind of create a bit of melodic tension with it. And, you know, I just think the track is always great. I think I was sad that they didn't play it when I originally saw them the first couple of times, or maybe just in 2018. But so when they brought it back at some point early on in the reunion, I was like, thank fuck. And it's continued to be fantastic all that time. And then Smack My Bitch Up, obviously, I'm not going to get into the bloody culture war discussions about, oh, why don't they make it say bitch anymore? Because I feel like if you're that bothered that, like, a song doesn't say bitch, I think you need to, like, you know, there's bigger things to worry about in terms of just the band anyway. And I get that, like, the thing about, like, oh, you know, they had a pretty good explanation for it back in the day, why not just keep it? I get that, but at the end of the day, if they want to change it, who the fuck cares? Like, I don't care, personally. But I also think that the way they've added that really kind of cheeky Kukuli sample into it, like the vocal sample, I think actually works really, really well. And obviously, of course, it's an ultimate crowd moment, you know, everyone getting down on the floor and then jumping up at that final drop. And the way that the Shannon Badia vocals come in live as well always sends chills down my spine every single time, and will continue to do so until the end of time, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, both Their Law and Smack My Bitch Up, absolutely unfuckwithable. Like, there is no, you know, I can't see it getting better than that. And then we get into the encore, which is actually, for a band normally, 6 songs is quite a long encore, but believe me, I'm all the gladder for it. So, like, first of all, Breathe will always be a Prodigy classic. Again, not a lot of retooling needed. And I actually think that the shorter version does make it hit hard. I mean, I know that there's been a joke within fan communities that, like, you know, the next version of Breathe is going to be like 50 seconds long and have like the first 4 bars of the beat and then the outro. But like, I actually think having it in a more truncated form works well to just keep the energy high, keep things flowing, keep things moving. You get the chorus a couple of times, you get the intro that, like, kind of, you know, hits really hard when it initially comes in. You know, you get all the bits of the track that kind of work well, I think. I mean, would it work well to have a little bit more of a breather? Maybe, but does it make that much of a difference? No, not really. And it will always be, I think, continue to be, you know, if you haven't come to a Prodigy gig before, most of them are probably expecting to hear Breathe. And so I think that in its current iteration is working about as well as it could do. Because, I mean, I've heard that track hundreds of times by now, but hearing it live, it just feels so fresh, you know, like, even if they've not done a lot to it in terms of, like, you know, remixing or anything like that, you know, it still is incredible. I would agree that I would like a kind of part 2 to it. So, like, on the Notorious tour, they did this kind of trap remix coda thing, or in like 2009, 2010, they started doing a Breathe dubstep kind of, you know, follow-up bit. So maybe, like, you know, a bit of a subsequent remix would maybe help with the length critique and to kind of keep it fresh for the band as much as anybody else. But yeah, I mean, Breathe, always great. And then Take Me to the Hospital, again, not a lot of retooling needed, and is maybe one of the hardest hitting songs in the set, and one that, again, I think is essential to Prodigy sets at this point, because it is just an incredible song, and to me is the one song that, if someone's never heard of the Prodigy before, to give them a kind of accurate glimpse into the more modern sound, I would always request this one, because the kind of, you know, the really fucking hard-hitting kind of chiptune style synths with the beats, but then also the reggae influence coming from the sample, the cinematic bit in the bridge, both Keith and Maxim on vocal duties works really well. And I think also the way that they've retooled it live so that Keith's vocals are kind of more of a, like, robot style, like a kind of robot vocoder style in the background. Obviously you can't hear it as prominently, so maybe some people have an issue with that, but I feel like when you kind of get a good pair of headphones on and listen to any of the live versions, I think that, like, the way they've done it with the robot vocals actually sounds really fucking sick to my ears, so I don't mind the way they've done that. And then Diesel Power Knight Rider, again, another one that is, I think, a hardcore fan favourite, in that I don't know where they came up with that idea. You know, Liam was just sat in his studio one day and he was like, what if I mashed up Diesel Power with the Knight Rider theme? Like, how the fuck does that ever even come to anybody? And so, you know, I think if I said that to anybody, you might think that that would be a really, you know, kind of stupid and corny and what have you. But no, it hits so hard. It works so great. It's got that kind of cinematic flair that you always want from a Prodigy track, but also while kind of keeping in, you know, it's kind of got that same industrial vibe as the original still. It's genius. I don't know how he came up with it, but thank God he did, because it makes for a definite highlight in the set. And then We Live Forever. Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but you don't need to do a lot with this. Maybe like truncate the structure shortly, which, you know, they did, and it, you know, kind of helps it to hit a bit hard. I mean, not that it was a long track to begin with, it wasn't even 4 minutes, but, you know, I feel like having those two kind of dropouts isn't really necessary in a live setting, so cutting down in the way they've done definitely makes sense. And I also think, again, nowadays I couldn't imagine a Prodigy set without it, because, you know, whether it's kind of unintentional, kind of, you know, darkly humorous foreshadowing in a way, or whatever it is, you know, I feel like it has to be a track that stays in the Prodigy sets just to remind people, like, you know, all the shit that they've been through, and yeah, we live forever, and we can still drop tracks like this that are just absolutely fucking slamming. I mean, it has been said by people that it is weird that kind of, you know, the oldest or the newest songs in the set are 8 years old at this point, which I'll get onto in a little bit, but I feel like if you're going to keep any of the tracks from the Notorious era, really, it should be Light Up the Sky, and it should be this one. Although, I would like to have Resonate back, please, Liam, thank you. Then Out of Space came in, and I was really glad, actually, the way that they've retooled this, because I like the kind of Out of Space link that they've been doing with the kind of, like, bleepy cyclical thing that they've been doing for the last couple of years. But then you might remember that when they played Glastonbury, they had a kind of like a sort of organ cinematic fill that was brand new when they played it at Glastonbury, that came before No Good, I think. But they decided to take that and move it to before Out of Space, which I think, again, it's a small change, but genius, and I think works really well. And also, people criticised Out of Space for being like literally like 8 bars, maybe 16 bars of the beat part, and then just going into like the outro and a sing-along, which I do think felt like there needed to be a bit more meat on the bone. And so even if it is just going around the beat part twice, I think it makes all the difference, and probably keeps a lot of old school fans happy as well that it lasts for a bit longer. And it would, I would say, be a perfect end to the set, if not for the fact that they played another surprise track afterwards. I mean, they started doing it, I think, in Bournemouth, maybe, or was it Cardiff? I can't quite remember. But basically, they did the encore, which is kind of Breathe through Out of Space. And then for the last couple of gigs, have been kind of not going off stage, but because they had a bit more time, decided to drop another random track that wasn't even written down in the set list. I mean, it kind of feels like at this point in the set or in the tour that it's kind of written down in invisible ink, if you see what I mean. Like, we might as well stay on and play it. But to have it be the big gun down, or Comanche, I guess it's called in a live setting, you would have given me like 50 guesses of like, right, the Prodigy on the next tour are going to stay on stage and play an instrumental track or like a largely non-vocal track that, you know, they haven't played for a while. Which one do you think it will be? It would probably take me quite a few guesses before I got to Comanche of all songs. But, you know, I think as a nice little kind of blast to go out into the night with, you couldn't really get a lot better. I mean, I could probably, again, Destroy would be cool. Medicine would be another cool one if Maxim wanted to have a bit more of a job to do. Wall of Death, even if they wanted to do an instrumental version of Wall of Death, that kind of thing. But I also think that Comanche is definitely one of their more underappreciated tracks, given that it's a deluxe edition bonus song. But I also think that kind of, you know, it does kind of whip the crowd up into a frenzy. Admittedly, not as much of a frenzy as I, you know, think it deserves, but still, I think as a kind of, you know, You know, you want a surprise, we'll give you it. Not only is it a really good surprise for the hardcore fans, because they haven't played it since 2014, and it's a bit obscure anyway, as it is, so it's a great one to pull out of their back pocket, but also, it's just a fucking great tune. And I was really, really glad that they kept it in the way that the setlist kind of continued to evolve over the tour, meaning that, aside from the London shows that are happening tonight and tomorrow night, I think I got about the optimum version of the set that I could possibly ask for. Like, all the extra songs that they got put in at certain times in the set, you know, fucking Thunder was great, Weather Experience was incredible, Comanche was fucking fantastic, you know, all the fills and stuff that I didn't realise were there, brilliant. And I think, you know, as much as people have criticised the set for being mostly the same over the last 4 years, which I do have to kind of agree with, again, it's like I said in my last video, they could play that same set 1,000 times and I would show up every time and, you know, rave out just as hard. And to me, this show proved that. They could play that same set 1,000,000 times and it'd be great, but also when they add those little surprises in, God, is it a rewarding experience. So yeah, the show was fucking great. The band were on fire. Liam, Leo, Rob, they were great. Maxim was just on top form as an MC. Even had a couple like genuinely laugh out loud moments in his kind of in between song banter, you know, taking shots at Craig David and stuff like that. It was really, really funny. I just feel like they were really kind of on a new vibration, to use the term. I don't really know what that means, but you get what I mean. Like they seemed like they were really in a flow state at this gig. I mean, maybe I'm biased because it's the one that I went to, but I'd say it definitely worked in their favour. So the show was fucking great. And as far as any more developments from the London shows, I imagine there will be some, because they tend to play a bit of a longer set, even if just by 1 or 2 songs for the hometown crowd. So I'll probably hold off on uploading this video until the London gigs have finished for this current tour, so then I can give any updates. Okay, so I'm just hopping in here because there has been actually a pretty major updates to the set in London. Well, I'll say major, it's only one song, but it is one of the most surprising updates I think I could have possibly foreseen, because in London they played an updated version of fucking Rough in the Jungle. Are you serious? A song that they allegedly haven't played since fucking 1993. That story where like fucking the guy from the government was fucking EQing the mix out of Liam's thing, which made them abandon the fucking rave movement altogether. They probably stopped playing Rough in the Jungle live before that happened.
I was really disillusioned with the whole rave scene, and the final straw was when we were in Scotland on stage at a thing called Resurrection, and there was a guy, an official, standing at the mixing desk EQing the bass out of the music, you know, and when we were on stage, and so I just walked off stage. That was it, you know. I wasn't playing my music, no way.
I remember when I saw it on Facebook, somebody had posted about it, I was like, there's no fucking way, and then it was true. And not only that, but it fucking slaps. The new version with those breakbeats absolutely goes insane. I know that, like, I think it's the Uplifting Vibes version that they used as a template for it. It's so good. It's like, oh, the beats are great. The synths, obviously, just classic. You know, he doesn't really do much. Liam didn't really do much with the synths, but then you don't need to, because I think it's one of their greatest synth lines, in my opinion. It always gets me kind of hyped up. And people were saying as well that they really loved kind of Maxim's old school MCing on top of it, which I agree. I think it's fucking great. It's like, you know, I mean, he said at the beginning, like, oh, Gen Z won't know this one, but I think they do. Because, like, it's the internet. I know if I would have been there, I would have absolutely lost my nut. It kind of reminds me a little bit of on the No Tourist tour when they played the original like burning version of Fire from like the single version, and it got played in Birmingham, I think, a couple of nights before, and that is like the kind of surprise that, you know, you like to see. That's what makes the night special, in that, you know, you hear that song drop and you're like, what the fuck, that one? Really? And, you know, but I think that's what's so great about it. Like, not only is the updated version fucking fantastic, first of all, but also I find it interesting because now the floodgates are open. Because if you think about it, right, if you were to go through all of the album tracks and kind of rank them from like biggest hits to to most obscure, obviously you'd have like Firestarter and Breathe and Smack My Bitch Up in the top. But then if you were to look for where Rough in the Jungle Business is, it's probably near the bottom end, you know what I mean? Like, maybe not as much as, like, fucking Medusa's Path or something, but, like, you know, it's fairly down there. And so what I would say now is that, like, the floodgates are fairly open in terms of, like, obscure tracks that they could drop into the set. I mean, granted, right, I'm not saying that we're going to turn around at the summer shows and fucking Goa is going to be, like an institution in the set all of a sudden. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is that, like, any track that anyone would want to kind of be put back into the set, that, you know, all bets are off, kind of. Like, that, you know, I know that I really want Resonate to be back in the set. After this, that's certainly more than possible. I mean, they already played it live in Paris in 2023, so there is that. I know that Young Son would give his fucking spleen to hear Spitfire live, which I thought was really great when they did it with that acid line on it in 2024, so why not bring it back? I've heard a few people say they might want Rhythm of Life back, even. I'd say that's more than probable, to be fair, because that's probably one of their harder tunes, so it'd probably be easy to remix into their, like, current sound. Do you know what I mean? There are so many possibilities, and I think I'll get onto this in a minute, but I think what's so kind of great about it is that when it dropped, the whole of the Discord and the community was there going, whoa, yeah, man, what, like, if this is dropping, imagine what else could drop, and people were getting, like, genuinely really excited about it, and that's the kind of thing that, you know, Liam, I think, is probably aware of, or if he's not, should be aware of, is just how exciting stuff like that is. You know, he drops tracks like that out of nowhere, and the reaction, you know, even if among, like, you know, the more mainstream audience it might be a bit dead, within, like, the right circles, it is fucking pandemonium, right? And I was thinking about this, is that if that's going to drop, what else could they do? And hear me out, because this is a bit of a fringe take here, but I remember there was an interview in 2009 where they were asked, production-wise, what their favourite Prodigy track was. And Maxim and Liam both said Smack My Bitch Up. Fair enough. But Keith said Android, which is a track from the What Evil Lurks EP, which is the first EP all the way back from February 1991.
Smack My Bitch Up for me.
Yeah. Smack My Bitch Up.
Mine's Android.
And I can kind of see why, because, you know, Keith first heard Liam's original demo tape and loved it, so I imagine he's got some level of nostalgia towards it. But also, given that fact, it might not be the most easy track to remix, because it is like a quite, I don't want to say stereotypical rave tune, because it is a fantastic tune. Like, I love it to bits, but, you know, it's not very easily maybe to mould within their modern sound, given kind of how slow the beats are. But hear me out here, right? Android, the synth intro, leading into Firestarter. You changed Claustrophobic Sting to the intro to Android. You make it some, like, really dreamy, ethereal thing. Tell me that wouldn't be the most cool thing you've ever heard, right? I know it's kind of out of nowhere, but that would be fucking sick. But, yeah, I don't see there being any changes to the set beyond this point. I know they're playing, like, Newcastle and Nottingham, but I'm saying that only because London tends to get the best version of the sets, and so that probably is it, because if they got Weather Experience, Thunder, Comanche, Rough in the Jungle Business, and Get Your Fight On got brought back, so they really got, like, the ultimate version of the Heavyweight Champions set. If there are any more developments, I'll probably just put them in a community post, but yeah, man, that's fucking sick. But yeah, as it is, the set was fucking incredible, and I can only, like, really be excited for what the London crowds might be getting. A lot of people have said that the London shows might be a good way, or that this tour in a general was a good way to warm up for the Warriors Dance Festival shows, in particular Milton Keynes 2, which I think is probably true. I think we maybe expected it to be a bit more of a kind of new phase of the Prodigy in this tour, which, you know, I actually think was kind of an understandable viewpoint, in that, you know, all the branding around it and the fact that it was an arena tour and the fact that the Disruptor tour, there had been new material, so maybe it was an album preview tour. You know, there was kind of, like, signs that were there, but I think, as, you know, reframing it as kind of a warm-up for the big festival shows like Milton Keynes, where I can imagine they will pull some deep cuts out of their back pocket. I mean, for fuck's sake, the last time they played Milton Keynes, they played fucking Minefields and Charlie, for fuck's sake. Charlie, they haven't played that live since 2005, and they haven't, to my knowledge, played it live since then either. So, I mean, I imagine there will be some more surprises for the MK show that I'm more than looking forward to kind of rambling on about should I want to at that point. But, I think the tour has been great. All the fans that I've seen have loved it, apart from people talking about new material. I think it just shows that the Prodigy are back on top form, and when they do eventually drop an album, I will be so ready, which again is another point of contention that... So I think the problem that people had isn't necessarily that there's no new material, but it was more, I think, that we got promised it and there wasn't any, because I think Liam said, we'll be dropping new tunes for the people, and then obviously there's the wiggle room where you can be like, well, they hadn't played Thunder and they hadn't played Comanche and they hadn't played blah 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 for a while, and it's like, well, yeah, that's true, but also, like, he knows that's not really what he meant. Again, I think that there is an element to it where Liam's sense of timescale is just completely fucked, so, there's no point really listening to him. It's kind of one of those things, I'll believe it when I see it. Do you know what I mean? Like, what I will say is that I don't agree with the kind of sentiment that some people are banning around where, oh, well, maybe there might not ever be a new album, maybe they're going to retire after this. I don't think so. I think the thing that kind of puts me off that line of thought is that there has genuinely been new tracks over the last 3 years, like only 3 of them, but they have been there, right? And there have been so many references to new material, a new album, new music, all that kind of stuff. I feel like there would be absolutely no chance in hell that they were just going to turn around after the, summer shows end and go, well, we're hanging up the jerseys, fella. Like, I don't see that happening, I mean, obviously, would I have liked to see, like, Hit the Switch or Disrupt Your Flow or Fight come back on this tour? Absolutely. Would I have loved to see completely new material on this tour? You're fucking damn right I would. It feels kind of easy to say now, but I feel like as Prodigy fans, all we have to do is wait. And I get that we've been waiting for the longest time that anyone has ever had to wait for new Prodigy material, and we probably will have to wait for longer. So, we are getting kind of, I would say, reasonably desperate at this point, but with good reason. But from what I can see, it will happen at some point. Just when that is, I'll only believe it when, Radio 1 or they have some cover art or something to show, like actual tangible something rather than just Liam's press statements. And there was actually a really great video from YouTuber The Heavy Frequency talking about some of the new tracks and what direction you think it's going to go in and kind of the time scale. It's a great video. I'll link it in the description because I feel like he covers it a lot better than I probably could at this point. And I would say as well, for the tour, being part of the fandom during tour season is so much fun. Like, I'm on the Brain Killer Discord group, like the Prodigy Brain Killer fan Discord group, which you should definitely join if you can. And there's also like the Dirt Chamber Facebook group as well. Things like that. It's always so fun whenever like concert season's happening, because it's kind of like at 9 o'clock every night you all kind of bundle together in a room and kind of sit there waiting for somebody to post the set list or to talk about the fact that Thunder's being dropped, and oh my god, what the fuck, Weather Experience, and oh my god, what the fuck, they played Comanche, what the fuck, just that kind of like excitement where you're kind of waiting for it and messaging back and forth and everyone's talking about stuff and speculating on stuff and kind of just nerding out about shit. It's it's a really enjoyable place to be as a fan, I think, to just kind of let that like true speculative fanboy thing kind of run wild for a bit. I have so much fun doing it, and a lot of the guys on the forum are really, really cool as well. So I think just like the fan spirit that this tour has created has been really, really cool as well. And I think the Prodigy know that. I think they know that they have like a really cool, like hardcore, diehard set of fans. Like, I think they're very much aware. But to me, just like how cool the Prodigy's fan base is just as people has been really driven home by this tour. And also how fun it is to just kind of interact and kind of be a fanboy, because like I say, I've heard their discography incalculable times at this point, but being able to interact with people and talk about it and nerd out about it, it makes me excited all over again, which I think is a fantastic thing. And I also think, right, that it's been a point brought up that Liam hasn't done a lot of interviews in like, you know, since the band reformed, you could probably count the amount of interviews that he's done on two hands. You know, like there's not been a lot. And so what I would say, I'm obviously, I do not think this would ever happen in a billion years, right? But I'm going to put it out there. So the reason why content over the last 3 or so years has been a bit sporadic is because I've actually been spending the time becoming an accredited journalist, right? Which I should be by July, I think, which is quite a cool thing. So, but I'm not trying to say that, like, oh, you know, I should interview them just because I've got that. But what I am saying is that I feel like, I mean, obviously my like official accreditation, like, that has nothing to do with it. Like, but I feel like what people are wanting now is for an interview with the Prodigy where, you know, it's not necessarily like an interrogative kind of thing where they're really asking, like, why the fuck, you know, why did you say last year that there was going to be new material and there wasn't? What are you playing at, Liam? Like, you know, I don't think anybody wants that. But I think they certainly want to ask questions of more substance than what can fans expect from the shows. And I think the only people that have been really good at probing them a little bit has been NME, when they've kind of gone, well, you said last year that new tunes are happening, so, you know, how's that going along? You know, they've kind of been probing a little bit more, but I feel like, you know, any Prodigy fan really would be great to interview them in, like Nico used to do back in the early 2000s when there was the Nico Zine site that had some fantastic interviews on it, and even I think resulted in Liam putting some tunes back into the set that he wouldn't have if they wouldn't have been mentioned to him by a fan. So what I think I'm saying is that, like, you know, I feel like having a fan interview the Prodigy would be great because they could ask the questions that, yes, they know like mainstream audiences would want to know, but also kind of get into the nitty gritty of like what the fans want to know, but also not asking it in a way that is kind of accusatory, but actually kind of trying to get some interesting answers out of them. So, like, you know, about people's like, you know, why is the set like remain the same? You could ask the question, you know, kind of in a way of like, you know, it must be difficult with such a vast back catalogue of like, you know, trying to obviously play the key tunes, but obviously, you know, kind of putting some curveballs in there and kind of like cater to the hardcore fans, and like deciding whether to put new material in the set must be difficult. Like, there's ways that you can ask the questions that I think would be genuinely kind of interesting to see. And I think, you know, whether it's me or whether it's any of the guys higher up on the kind of brain killer food chain, because there are definitely some guys that are probably more qualified as Prodigy fans than me to do that job. Like, you know, Arsendis would be one. I think that's how you pronounce their name. Sorry, buddy, if I butchered that. Ragged Flag would be another one. Maybe James Jupiter, Carl Stroud from the Dirt Chamber group, Young Sun. Shout out Young Sun, he's a cool guy. I think, you know, having that kind of, you know, more fresh fan perspective, because I think he became a fan at the time of the reunion shows, maybe, or during the pandemic. So having that kind of fresh-faced angle to it, if you like, might work rather than someone who's been following them for so long. I mean, obviously, if someone's been following them for that long, they'll know the intricacies. But I think, you know, someone like Youngson interviewing them would kind of have that like upfront kind of, you know, excitement to it that I think would be make for a really good interview. I think so. Any of those guys really would be a really fucking cool prospect. And I think that because I think there was talk at some point of Brainkiller having like a Q&A with Liam. I don't quite know what happened there. Neo Rev, I forgot about Neo Rev. He'd be a great one as well, because I think he's actually got Liam's, or they've at least had some correspondence in the past. So, you know, any of those guys would be fucking great. And I also think that having that kind of, you know, like hardcore fan specific Q&A would be a really great thing. But yeah, that's really everything I had to say for the video today. So yeah, gig was fucking great. The Milton Keynes shows in the summer season are going to be fucking great, I'm sure. The Prodigy fandom always continue to be great. Maybe one of us will get to interview them one day. Who knows? If they do, that'd be really fucking cool. And, you know, I guess up until now, or I guess for now, I'm just looking to the future, you know, ready to kind of, you know, see whatever surprises they throw at us down the line, because I'm sure there will be some, but you've just got to keep your eyes and ears peeled and just, you know, I mean, you have got to have the patience of like the fucking Buddha, but, you know, there will be something coming down the pipeline. I'm absolutely sure of that. You just got to trust the process, I guess. So, yeah, the last couple of days and the last couple of weeks have just reminded me how fucking great it is to be a Prodigy fan. The show itself that I went to couldn't have driven that home more.